Right. What's up, everybody? Blake here from the Outcast Haven. Today, I am joined by Rob from Tolarian Dropouts. Rob is like the grinder of all grinders. This man is like the skirmish champion. Like every time I turn on Facebook or YouTube, I get like the little notification that Tolarian Dropouts is live and Rob is grinding a skirmish. Today we're recording this Sunday night, and Rob took one down. So I want to first off want to give you a little cheers
Yeah, man.
to the
Yeah, I
win for Dorinthea. So
appreciate that.
congrats on that first and foremost. And let's start there. What is it? What has your experience been like so far? You've played a ton of skirmishes. I don't know if you actually know the number, but I would be curious the number of skirmishes. What has been your experience so far in these events and how they've been run? What you've seen in the meta and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, man, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Love your guys' channel. Love what you guys do. And thanks to everybody coming out to watch this video. Just to talk about a little bit of, the skirmish feedback. Your first question, I I don't know the exact number. I'm actually like trying to pull it up right now on my computer to tell you how many I've played. I think it's in the realm of like maybe like 7 or 8 skirmishes so far. So yeah, and I've been lucky and just had some good runs. I took 2 down out of like I think it's like 8 I've played in or so far or something like that. But yeah, I mean the skirmish thing has just been phenomenal. The whole the way that it's ran, the support from LSS, the support that it gives to LGSs to make money in a time right now where it's been kind of, tough to make a lot of money or, pulling that revenue from a game that's traditionally played in person, with the COVID times and whatnot. So it's just been awesome experience. It's been an awesome experience all around, man. Meeting players, getting to do the stream, just getting to chat with everybody, play some competitive flesh and blood, and learn a lot of things, dude.
Yeah, I think it's really easy when you're somebody who plays a lot like you do, or somebody like me and the guys on the channel who have played for a long time. We're pretty seasoned players amongst us, and you're now, I mean, a seasoned player as much as you've been playing and grinding. And there are a lot of players who I think are pretty seasoned now and have had a ton of reps and feel really comfortable with the game. And I give you a ton of credit because I watch your stream a lot, or I'll pull it up whenever I can while you're playing.
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
there's a lot of new players, and I think it's really easy to get frustrated when a new player is playing kind of clunky or slow or out of sorts. And I give you a ton of because you've been playing a ton, and I think you're obviously really comfortable with the mechanics and the gameplay and the interactions, but you've been really patient with some of these newer players, and I think that's a huge nod to somebody who cares about the community, because you're focusing on like the long game, right? It's easy to focus on the short game about winning this skirmish. Like you got to win this skirmish. You got to show
Right.
that you're the man. But taking the time to not get frustrated or annoyed with like a funny camera angle or somebody who doesn't quite understand a mechanic just right, like that takes, to me, that takes somebody who's actually not just concerned about winning now, but concerned about the fact that if we want to be winning at this game in like 5 years, the game has to exist. And that means having some patience with a lot of these guys who are newer and have never really played beyond across the table with like one friend, or maybe even just like a husband and a wife like sitting at a table playing. They're new. It's tough enough playing on webcam, but then on top of that, to be new to the game in general, like it's a lot to take in. And you've had a ton of patience with some of those guys who you can tell are just newer players trying to kind of figure some of that stuff out. So thank you for being patient. Thank you for being community minded in that sense, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, I think he nailed it right on the head. It's I mean, you could just grind tournaments out and be that guy that's just shuts the camera off at the end of the game and not thank the opponent or thank I try to thank everybody for letting me stream the game and whatnot, but just importantly, more importantly, just like really taking your time with players, making sure you're explaining things clearly, you're reading the cards clearly so that viewers at home and stuff like that, and the newer players you're playing against can really understand fully like the game and the cards and what they do and what's going on. You nailed it on the head with, we're not going to have a competitive scene if we don't grow the community now. I'm a very competitive person in nature, but more importantly, um, I like bringing newer people into the game or doing what I can to help players, get into the game or learn something new. I mean, I've like locally, I've just given cards away to new players. There's like a younger guy that comes to our shop, and he wanted to play Ninja, and he didn't have Crucible cards or access to Crucible or whatever, and he was just getting in. I just threw him some Majestics to get his deck going. It's all about like growing the community, like you said,
Hmm.
and really like making it big so that way later on down the road we have something to play, we have a big event to go to and compete in, things of that nature, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're player focused and player minded on our channel, and that's why I mean when we were talking, I was like, I want to do something warrior focused because I think it's really interesting that the American meta has been really warrior centric, which I think is really cool. Obviously, there's Ira, but you notice a stark contrast here compared to New Zealand because New Zealand is Ira, and it's interesting because it seems like over there you have like their road dog warrior players like Tom Penny who are just like, this is what I do, I'm a warrior player,
Yeah.
man. And I appreciate that a ton, but it's interesting because like over there it's Ira and then those guys. Over here it's very much balanced, and I would love to get your perspective on why you think the American meta has had more success with Ira, and why you think the Warriors here have played really well into Ira and have kind of kept it even. Do you think that's has to do with like more Warrior players, or do you think that the decks have been specifically teched to counter Warrior or Ira from the Warrior player perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned Tom Penny. It's funny because Tom and I go back and forth all the time talking about, how we're gonna get Dorinthea to consistently beat Ira, because Ira is like the boogeyman of the format, right?
Yeah.
It's such a consistent deck that you really have to play so tight, and really pick the correct lines of play in order to get the win, because the consistency of the Ira deck, the Ira player can make a mistake or two and still easily pull it out because it's like more of a controlled style deck where it wants to control the pace and the tempo of the game, if you will, control when it takes damage, when it's doing damage. It's just really controlly. The Ira deck can block for 2, 3 cards in hand with flick access to flick flacks, which buff the combo cards that they block with later down in the chains if you could run into like go wide builds. Um, and then they can still have one blue left in hand or one in arsenal to really threaten like a big threaten a big attack, whether that be like pitch a blue Kadachi into Drone of Brutality for 7 off Ira's buff, and Drone doesn't go away. You know what I mean? That just goes to the bottom, comes back later on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I think what I've noticed here is also kind of a stark difference in how those decks are built and how the warrior decks are kind of being piloted towards that find your window and then just go as tall as possible and hope that they don't have a few flick flacks or you don't run. I know in your final today I was watching and it felt like he just had unmovable and flick flack and
Yeah.
sink below. Every time he pulled one out, I'm like, oh man, does he have aggressive cards in this deck, or is he's just gonna unmovable and Kadachi until it's just drones left? Like that's almost what the deck felt like, because it just felt like every time you had a window to go tall, he would just like slap down like a yellow unmovable or something and hit you, and
Yep.
you're just like, oh my god. And it like playing around that into Ira is such a tough thing to do. But
It's
I
hard.
think the more go tall strategy that has been adopted over here has been really significant in success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could kind of touch on that a little bit. So, two things with that. So, the matchup for the warrior player, right? You're trying to essentially get them to burn through flick flacks and defense reactions and maybe even defend with some of their big threats like E-Strike and Flying Kick. Um, you know, maybe a Command and Conquer if they got it. They'll usually play like Life for a Life early on. but you want to try to burn through their defense reactions like flick flacks. Play a sink below, maybe play some springboards from Arsenal. That way, you know what I mean. That way, in the later game, you can pitch your red attack reactions and your spoils of war. Just you got to really pitch your threats, and you got to play a slower game. You can't just go tall and go for a blowout turn, because the Ira deck, it's so unforgiving to the warrior deck. It seems you have to play very tight. If you make one mistake as the warrior, you're already behind, and then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't keep that tempo up with the warrior deck, playing against the Ira deck, you just get behind. You have to constantly balance, like, what you're presenting, what threats may be in your hand. Um, because the warrior deck is like a very bluff style deck, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
opponent doesn't know what attack reactions you have in your hand, whether it's overpower, which is a huge attack reaction in Go Tall Dorinthea, where you're trying to basically play attack reactions so that your attack just gets buffed and buffed and buffed, and it gets over their blocks. There's like route, but route is usually like a one of, and is usually like a game finisher, because route puts back a card back into their hand. Against Ira, it's not necessarily like something that gains you tempo. If you're just adding more cards back into their hand for them to just potentially block with next chain or swing with on their turn. But and then you mentioned the unmovables, and to kind of touch on um, the fact that some IRA players and just the way the meta is shifting, the unmovables came to be because of the warrior players playing
Mm-hmm.
tall warriors, playing a tall Dorinthea build, and we started seeing like one yellow unmovable. And shout out to my opponent Brendan Patrick. He's a phenomenal player. He's been playing forever. He's got a 4-digit number. He's in the U.S. Yeah. And he's just a really, really good player. And it puts a lot of pressure on you to perform and make the right plays. And tonight, in the finals, he played a second unmovable. And when he played that, I'm like, oh, another yellow unmovable. I did not think that was coming. Like, I was expecting one. Um, I Ideally, it comes out when you have like Iron Song Determination on board, and they'll get yellow unmovable in their arsenal so that they can stop the Iron Song turn. Because that's, as a warrior, that's your best friend, is that setting up a nice, wide and semi tall Iron Song Determination turn, because they can only block with one from hand. So if you catch them slipping without a defense reaction in arsenal, you're feeling pretty good. But then yellow unmovable comes, just ruins your day.
Yeah, I got caught in I played a mirror yesterday in the Red Riot tournament, and I had that classic Dorinthea feel where we're both trying to get to our determination finishing turn because we were both on single digit health. And sure enough, he got his, and I looked at the next four cards, and there was mine. He was one cycle earlier than me on his finisher, and
Yeah.
that determination is so important. And it's interesting because like that's kind of what Ira always feasted on Dorinthea, I think, early, because people were trying to go wider with Dorinthea and make sure they could get two swings every turn. I think the reason that has kind of been realized as maybe not the most efficient strategy is that Blitz feels like a format that goes by fast enough that capitalizing on your counter is less impactful than in Constructed, because in Constructed, if you can keep that counter for multiple turns, it adds so much value. But in Blitz, the game is so short that people are just completely willing, after you get the counter sometimes, to just dump a whole hand and just say, no, we're not going to have it. Let's just move on. And they'll dump 9. They'll just put 9 down on the board and keep one card to swing back at you. So like the counter typically in Blitz only stays around for one turn. So focusing on a strategy that's very counter efficient and trying to keep that counter, it felt logical because that's what Dorinthea did in Classic Constructed. So people kind of carried that into Blitz. And it's interesting because seeing like the American focus on like the tall build, and I think that that's become like the mindset here was everyone's like, look, let's just go tall because ninjas want to
Right.
block wide. So let's go tall and not let them benefit from their flick flack, because being able to kind of take away the value of their flick flack turns where they throw in that flick flack and then they're ready to hold that combo for like a 5 swing. And you're just like, no, I'm just going to go for 8 on this one pass turn. It's you, man. It's like,
Yeah.
you have another flick flack? No, cool. Take 4. I pass.
Right. Right. Yeah. It definitely it comes to a point. The counter is great, but in a different in a different line of thinking, the counter sometimes puts more pressure on the defending player to really stop that first attack and get that counter out of there. So you use that as your advantage sometimes as well, whether and I'll use examples like this. Sometimes IRA players, or we'll see this in Wizard a lot as well, will where they will dump their whole hand or like defend with like 3 cards in hand just to stop the attack. If they have like a drone and all 4 cards totals 11, they'll dump the whole thing as opposed to only blocking for 9, just to get some added assurance. But that's where like this card comes into play, and that's Twinning Blade.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things there. If you can get that counter right on your weapon, I mean, if you get 2, usually that doesn't stay around for very long before they're just dumping the whole hand to try to get that off, because that
Yeah.
becomes very threatening if it's 2 counters on the Dom Blade. I mean, let's be real. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you could set up a turn where it's like you have Glint in your hand or Arsenal, and you also have Twinning Blade, or you have a Singing Steel Blade and Glint, or anything that gives your weapon attack go again. So like I played tonight, the turning point in the last game was I played a blue hit and run to give the weapon go again, no other effects, because I had a Singing Steel Blade in Arsenal, and I knew that towards the late game, right, when you're pitching like a blue and you have not used your route and you just swing the Dawn Blade for 3, it definitely the defending player, and will definitely start thinking of, all right, what could it be? What's in his hand? He's literally representing that he could have the route, whether or not I had route or whatnot. But I played a turn where, because I was representing route, he has to block with more cards than he traditionally would want to, just in case I route one of the cards back to his hand, right?
Yep.
So I played like hit and run to give it go again, and then swung. I think he blocked with 3 cards. That's when I hit the Singing Steel Blade out of Arsenal to go get Twinning Blade, and it allows you basically, if you have go again, it allows you to just bypass that chain and be able to swing the Dawn Blade again. Um, so I mean the counter, it's somewhat important in Blitz. Sometimes it's not, but I don't know. I mean, for me, I feel like if I get a counter early, that's just more pressure that I could just put on. It's
Mm-hmm.
an attack for 6 off like a Red Warrior's Valor uh, is good, but an attack for 7 off a Red Warrior's Valor, having that extra counter
Yeah.
makes them have to have a defense reaction for 4 on top of a card that they have to defend with from hand, or equipment or whatever. Otherwise it's 3 cards. If they want to
Yeah.
stop that whole attack.
Yeah. I think that's where like some of it, I think the strategy that has most stuck out to me about the go tall warrior strategy has been doing things that kind of break the traditional warrior math, because I think what made warrior what gets people, a good player into warrior is probably how I should say it. Somebody who understands how to play into warrior typically understands that for the most part, like warrior math is 3s. So like the Dawn Blade is 3, most of the scary buffs are 3. So
Right.
when warrior players started to go, okay, now let's bypass some of the 3s, and I think like blue overpower is something that's been in warrior decks for a long time, because it's a
Yeah.
great way to go 4. They think that they're blocking that extra 3, so they block for 9, and you go, cool, 10. And if they don't have a defense reaction, you just push that 1 through that gives you your counter or gives you the go again off a Warrior's Valor. And it's really important. But then you started to see like red overpower, which was
Right.
huge because
Yeah.
like that all of a sudden can lead to a blowout turn. And it's stuff
Yeah.
like that that the deck started to be more just reds and blues and less of a kind of blue heavy strategy. So going forward, okay, this is my next question that I would love to talk about and get your perspective on. Going forward, if you see these ninjas doing more of this unmovable, right? You start to see some Iris make a turn into just hyper control strategy. How do you think that affects what the warrior decks are going to have to do to combat that if they're playing more unmovables?
Yeah, so I don't really know. In what I'd have to like really think on it. I'm thinking about your question here and seeing and saying to myself, well, am I going to see a red unmovable? Because that's like a whole nother problem. The reason that the yellow unmovable is threatening is because of it will block for 7, and that number is very important against the warrior build. It'll block for 7 if it comes out of arsenal. It'll block for 6 from hand. So if it blocks for 7 out of arsenal and I have an Iron Song Determination, which gives my weapon +1 and dominate, I swing my weapon for 3, that's 4, and then I play something like a red Warrior's Valor for +3. Or if I just swing it and I play a regular attack reaction for +3, that's 7. So 7 seems like that magic number that it just
Mm-hmm.
stops it. And then you have that added benefit of it, pitches for 2, which is good for the IRA player in a pinch. It's a very specific but well thought out inclusion as like a IRA counter. I mean, I first saw it from my opponent tonight, Brendan. I mean, like last weekend, he just busted out a yellow unmovable, and everyone's like, "Where'd this a yellow unmovable come from? Like, what is that?"
Yeah.
And he said straight up, he's like, "Yeah, man, it's for the Warriors." You know what I mean? And so I don't know what like red unmovable would look like, because that is also threatening, because you say to yourself as a warrior player, if he or she does not have an arsenal card, my biggest threat is unmovable yellow, and it's going to block for 6 from hand. So that means that they're going to have to pull their tunic away, and to get that 7 block.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they pop in a red unmovable, now they can block for 7 from hand, potentially 8 from arsenal. And I mean, you nailed it right on the head. Like sometimes, you just need to play like a blue out for blood to just sneak in 1 damage over to either get that counter, or to get like the red or to get the go again off like Warrior's Valor, or just to even be able to swing with your weapon again. That's the hit, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, talking about moving in the future, I've messed around with playing with. I played a Command and Conquer in I think the Deck Edge event that I won. I think I played a Command and Conquer in that. I played Dauntlesses as well, which seemed to help ish against the Ira build. Um, if they have Tunic up and you play a Dauntless, like a Tunic counter up, where
Mm-hmm.
they have
Yeah.
3, right, and they can use it for a resource. Um, Dauntless just doesn't really feel good because you're not using it for its intended purpose, right? You want to strip 2 cards out of their hand instead of 1,
Mm-hmm.
by making them pay for their defense reaction. So I've messed around with red Dauntlesses. I'm currently, I think tonight I ran 1 blue, just to kind of throw in there. And Dauntless might be something that becomes more relevant the more unmovables I see, because that's 3 cards out of their
Mm-hmm.
side. If they're unmovables in Arsenal, then if I play a Dauntless, they have to pay 4 for it now, not 3, and that's 2
Yeah.
cards. Or their tunic counter with that. I've also been messing around with like Flock of the Featherwalkers as well.
Yeah.
Um, It's a card that I've messed around with and constructed. I also play like Warrior and constructed a lot as well. Um, and that's like a completely different build. But yeah, I mean, I messed around with this card a little bit in the past couple of skirmishes, and it seemed to be okay. I just don't think that I have it down 100% yet. Um, but it felt good playing Phlox early against the Ira build to build basically Quicken tokens,
Mhm.
so that was like less um, cards like Warriors Valor and Spoils for War that I was having to use early to get go again. You know, like I would just get
Mhm.
one, get a Quicken token, end my turn on a Quicken token or a Flock, and get the Quicken token, and then you know I could just keep going with that go again
Yeah.
strategy every time. I mean, yeah, I mean we'll see. I mean, Dauntless might be the answer to your question if more immovables start coming out and they're just playing like all defense reactions. You know, they're playing Fate for Scene. They're playing. I don't know about Fate for Scene, but they're playing Sync, Springboard Somersault, Unmovable, all the flick flacks. You know, Dauntless might be good.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Flock is an interesting card for the same reason that like I think in constructed Command and Conquer is really strong in Dorinthea is because a lot of people will at certain times in a game you'll get a turn where somebody will throw a heavy block to try and prevent a go again, and they'll just you have a counter, you played a Warriors Valley, and you're like no, we're not playing this game, and they'll dump their hand. And if you don't have a Twinning Blade, another great option is you're like, well, I have go again, I got nothing else to do. You're just like Flock for 5. And it's
Yeah,
like it's a big damage swing, and then next turn it basically saves you a card to get go again. It's like pre-go against your next turn, and it's almost like giving you as a warrior player a 5 card hand if you don't have arsenal. Like it's almost like having a 5 card hand because you no longer have to use a spoils or a
right.
glint or a warrior's value. You're not digging for a go again. It's just innate. This first swing is just going to have go again. Now I get more cards in hand because to your point, like the trick with warrior and the biggest thing I've like tried to tell people when I play a newer warrior player or somebody's asking about playing warrior is warrior is all about bluff. And if you empty your hand and you give them all the knowledge, then they feel way more comfortable. But a good warrior player at times will sometimes hold a card that maybe a newer warrior player wouldn't. Like they'll just go Dawnblade for 3 and you're holding like 3 cards because that's a lot scarier to a player is the unknown in warrior because now they're thinking,
Right.
okay, it I I don't want to give him Iron Song determination, but out for blood still exists. Like red out for blood is +3 no matter what. I don't have to give them out for blood. I don't have to give them stroke of foresight. So I think a good player will sometimes find that weird. You can get a good player stuck in like a real thinks trap where you're just like Dawnblade for 3, 2 floating, and they're like, oh god, there's so many cards in that deck that just +3 innately, and
Right.
if I
Yeah.
don't block, I could just eat 6
Yeah.
and or I
Yeah.
could eat
That's
9 and
correct.
like yeah, if you just threaten cards, it's scary and keeping cards in hand is so important and ending a turn with a quicken token where you're just like my next attack just you can just pitch a blue, you're like Dawnblade for 3. It's like 4 cards in hand, 1 in arsenal. It's like, oh god, like this is gonna get out of hand. Like this could be a disaster. Like if you could just eat a turn. So the other thing that I'm curious is you've played in a bunch of skirmishes, and one of the things I know that you see a lot in New Zealand is kind of like every game, every TCG in the world kind of exists in a triangle. And it always seems like there's like 3 decks that kind of the whole meta exists around or inside of those 3 decks. And in New Zealand, it seems like the predominant decks always end up being Warrior. We always see Dorinthea, Kasai here and there. You got your Ira and Blitz, and then they've got a pretty heavy dose typically of Kano because Kano is one of those decks that just punishes misplays or punishes misbuilds. And I think it's interesting because we haven't seen a ton of Kano here in the States. Personally, I think that has a lot to do with just reps. Kano's like a really like rep demanding deck. It requires that you know the deck. It requires you understand how to play it. I know like Jason here with us at the Haven, like he has played so much Wizard that it's absurd. Sometimes like sometimes I get to sit down and I play and someone pulls out a deck and it's not Wizard. I'm just like, man, I'm excited to play with my armor because it's been a
Right.
week since I've been able to play with my armor because I got to play with this godforsaken null rune. I just want to use my armor at some point. And Wizard is a really challenging deck to play, and it's a really punishing deck to play into for misplays. I think to your point, Ira can be pretty forgiving when you make a mistake. Warrior has some turns, but Warrior can punish you when you misplay. But then there are also times where you just get lucky and like somebody just misblocks, and you're like, all right,
Right.
time to end them. And they like throw
Yeah.
one card, and you're like, oh, oh no,
Yeah.
baby, what
Why did
is
you
you
do that?
doing? Oh no, like put it back, just take it back. And that's how Wizard is, right? Like with Wizard, you get like stuck. If you get stuck in like your own game plan and you just like dump your hand, you're like, haha, I swing for 7. And they're like, how many cards do you have in hand? You're like, I got none. And they're like, and you have 8 life? And you're like, oh no, I think I just died. And it's like that
Yeah.
horrifying feeling of realizing like you could just die before you kill them. And not
Yeah.
having that is an interesting thing to see in the meta. So what are your thoughts on that? Have you seen much Kano? The Kano that you've seen, has it been piloted like really clean, or does it seem like it's people who are still kind of figuring the deck out? Do you think that having Kano exist in the meta would create more diversity even than Dorinthea and Ira? Or do you think it would still just be Dorinthea, Ira, and then Kano? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've run into a bunch of wizards throughout these skirmish events. My finals on in the Deck Edge event, I played a wizard, and that's the thing. Like with wizard, is we were talking about it. It's like it takes 10 heads to play that deck,
Yeah.
and it's just a whole nother game, right? Like not just for the wizard player, but for me playing the wizard player, I have to play completely different. I'm literally every turn I'm just swinging the Dawnblade for 3, holding up blues. I'm praying that I'm drawing my blues, the hold in my hand, just to make sure that I just don't die on my own turn when I have lethal. Um, Yeah, and so like I played finals with a guy, a really good player again, in the Deck Edge event, and he was just so tired and like mentally fatigued after like 10 hours. There was like 2 events that day of playing warrior or playing wizard the whole entire day, because it's next level. Trying to set up combos, you're opting, you're trying to see what could I do? What could I put? You're counting odds. It's almost like you're intentionally counting cards, or pitching cards in a certain order for them to come back up because you burn through your deck a lot
Mm-hmm.
in Wizard. And yeah, I mean it's a very hard deck to pilot. So I mean that's a, I guess, negative. That's like one of the factors I think why we don't see as many um, wizards in the meta as like say Dorinthea's or Ira's especially. I mean, Ira is just nothing against the Ira deck. It's a very, very good deck, but it just plays itself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy, to play. I mean, from on the surface. Now you get down to like the finals at one of these, big events, and it's just you have to play it really perfectly to make sure that you win. Especially if you're playing like against another really good opponent. Um, but it's just kind of easy to get into. Whereas the Kano deck, it's like playing on like super hard mode, expert mode, legendary Halo mode. You know what I mean? Like it's not an easy deck to pilot. My good buddy that we play in person, AJ, he's been running Wizard. He wants to get really good at it, and he's doing a really good job. And whenever we play, I mean, I think he's got the I think he has more wins in the matchup between me and him. Just because like I think the Wizard is favored against the Warrior matchup. Also, it really depends on who goes first and second in that
Mm-hmm.
matchup, as well as the Warrior. I always want to try to go second, to keep that tempo. But yeah, I think we'll start seeing more Kanos. Hopefully start topping events. like winning events and stuff. I see them all the time in top eights. I mean, today I played two or three of them in this past event, and it's not that the players aren't good. They're good players. It's just a deck that against the warrior matchup, the game only goes 3 turns max. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they sometimes won't even get a tunic counter, and usually they will just get one tunic counter. That's it. So it's either I'm dead or they're dead. But you have to meticulously, from the warrior standpoint, you just have to be very careful with your swings. You have to be careful with priority, because wizard operates on like a different axis, right?
Yeah.
You have to like ask them, do you want to do wizard stuff? Am I okay to move to my end step? Stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I don't know. I think wizard is in the meta. And we see it over in New Zealand too. I know like Rohan.
Mm-hmm.
Rohan, man, he's a wizard player, and we've chatted. He's a really good player. And there's I think Jason. I
Yep.
think
Jason
he
Long.
just yeah, he topped the calling, I think, with wizard. And it's just a tough deck to play. I mean, you have to play it a lot,
Yeah.
and you just have to set up the right turns. I mean, that talk about an unforgiving deck. That's a very
Yeah.
unforgiving deck.
Yeah.
You have to play it super tight, and as a warrior player, you just have to keep pressure on the Kano
Yeah.
player.
Yeah. I think that like the warrior decks, the current way that they're being run, the only way that it's a tough matchup, I think, for warrior in general, because a lot of what warrior does relies on the armor. Not it doesn't win or lose based on its armor, but like blade hold and bracers are so important to the strategy in terms of just being able to turn threes into fours, or have a turn where you don't have the best hand, or you need an extra couple resources. You just blade hold to get your resources for free, and having to like rethink your strategy in that matchup makes a significant difference. But I think that the other thing is, here the warrior decks being so blue heavy to pay for some of the big red stuff that you're doing. Like, you can't run red overpower in a deck and have blue overpower in a deck and not run a bunch of blues, or you will see red overpower every game 2 times and never be able to play it because you'll never have
Yeah,
enough. So the fact that the decks are heavy blue makes a significant difference too, because you're just able to kind of grind away the game and keep just out of reach. Because I think that's the key, is that you have to stay out of reach. The trick is, I think a lot of times, like, wizards need a lot of reps into Dorinthea, because it's one of those decks that when you're playing Dorinthea, like as we've said, it's a really unforgiving deck when you miss block or miss time like certain windows, and wizard is an unforgiving deck to play. So when you like take, it's like you're not just, it's like that classic rock in a hard place situation where you're like, you're
right.
playing the hardest deck to pilot into the hardest deck to block, and you're trying to do both of those things simultaneously, and it's like one mistake it can be absolute catastrophe. Like, you can end the
Yeah,
world. You can end the whole game by making one misplay, one misblock, one misopt, and it's punishing. But I think that that's the thing, is that, to your point, I think we'll see more wizards topping more events as wizards get more reps, because they're there. Like, wizard players are out there, but again, I think the challenge is, like, watching a wizard player try to figure out how to navigate a field of blitz is oftentimes the difference between, like, we're playing checkers and they're playing 4D chess. Like, we're not
yeah,
we're not even playing the same game. And then on top of that, it's like, also, you're playing 4D chess, and we're just gonna be going like this randomly. We're gonna just be covering your eyes and uncovering them, and you're gonna have to just kind of make a blind guess and hope that that top card is the right thing and you didn't do the wrong thing, and it's a
yeah,
punishing deck. And I'm excited to see more wizards in the meta. I think the thing that's been interesting so far is that the meta game in the States has been inherently different, but I think a lot of that is the fact that we had a lot of information that they haven't had in New Zealand, because in New Zealand the game has been developing and they didn't really have anything to go off of, so they were kind of just ebbing and flowing as things went. And here in the
right.
here in the States, it's like, we got a really good scouting report of this team that we're going to play, and now everybody has so much information. that we're able to tech really well against a lot of things and build really complex decks because we were given a lot of information going into the game, which is a really cool thing to see. And I'm excited to see how the game continues to ebb and flow with these skirmish events and seeing how people are teching for different decks now. And if some of these decks that are less represented start to see a little more representation as they're able to get a feel for what Ira and Dorinthea are doing, and they can kind of go, okay, I see this and I see this. Now I can kind of build this little inroad strategy that kind of works against both things and allows some of these underrepresented decks to kind of jump to the forefront and win some of these events, because I'm just excited. I think it's really cool to see the game being played, because we had so long where we're like, we've got this game and it's amazing and I'm playing it with my buddies, but man, I wish we could just play it with strangers, because there's something about like just playing with strangers, man. Like go into the game store even, and like you're like, I got my 3 buddies I play with all the time, but now there's a dozen other people here playing the game, and I could just randomly get matched up against somebody and see something in their deck that I'm like, where did this come from? Like this is the craziest spice I've ever seen in this deck, and I love it. And that stuff's really good for the game. So going forward, are you just, you're going to be a diehard warrior player? Is that what we can expect from you?
Yeah, I mean, I play what feels comfortable to me. I mean, I've played events with the Ira deck, not these skirmish events, because I'm just really comfortable with the Dorinthea deck. And it's just, there's something, my buddy Davis and I have been talking about it. It just feels good beating like Iras. You know what I mean? Like I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be that guy, but it's like that was the top deck. I mean, you saw at the calling there was 6 Iras, I
Yeah.
think, right? One
6 of 8.
Dorinthea,
Yep. 6 of the top 8.
yeah, and one wizard, so it's like that's the deck to beat. And it just feels good too. Working on a deck with your friends and other really good players in the game, in the community, and then that deck becomes successful and you learn how to pilot it. It's like you almost feel better about it than just picking up the deck list off fabtcg.com and playing it, because I've done that. I went to like a local armory, drove to one maybe about an hour away, played the Ira deck. I won the event, and it just, the deck drives itself. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. I also was kind of messing around with a Katsu build. I
Okay.
saw the other night, one of the games that I streamed. The finals was Katsu versus Ira.
Ah, yeah, the English guy, right? There's the English guy that
Yeah,
was just rocking
Dave.
Katsu, yeah.
Yeah, Dave is his name. And he was rocking this super cool Katsu build, and I was just really intrigued by it. So he sent me his list, and I tweaked like a few things, but for the most part, that core is there. So you might see me bust that out. Uh, I might get a wild hair and try to play some wizard myself. We'll see. I mean, that's just like next level though. 10 heads. It's hard enough to like play and try to like stream the games and talk to the audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your followers and stuff like that while you're playing. It's like I can't imagine trying to like,
Yeah, yeah,
remember
Wizard.
exactly what I pitched, what I didn't pitch. It's that's a crazy build.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest challenge with Wizard sometimes is you have to think about all the other things, like we talk about that, like with, we're trying to record our games and stuff to put out on the channel, and it's not a lot to do, it's not a crazy amount of stuff to do, but you're kind of just keeping an eye on everything all at once while you're still trying to play a game and play at a high level when you can. And it's those things where it is funny how sometimes like we'll go play every once in a while in person, and then I forget how much easier it is to play in person when I'm not trying to record a game or have a conversation with somebody, or you're not trying to think about like, oh, is the recording still going and is everything clean, am I not zooming in and out too much when I'm playing TTS, is my lighting good, like you're just taking into account all those like silly things that you normally wouldn't. But I want to tell you, Rob, I appreciate like all the effort that you go through to stream this stuff, and I'm grateful that you're putting in the time and energy to not just play but get content out to the community, because I think right now that's
man,
so, it's so helpful just to have games accessible to people to watch, because I know for me as a player, whenever I've stepped into a new game, just having access to gameplay sometimes and seeing certain lines that, you know, you get stuck in your rut, maybe of playing a certain line, and seeing somebody play a card a little different than you, or sequence their turn a little different than maybe you would, is really important for new players to understand. And you know, the energy and the effort that you've put in to just get the accessibility to new players to see games played. And I appreciate the energy you put into, you know, keeping interaction going with people in the comments and stuff. And that's a whole extra thing to do. It's a whole bunch of extra work that you're putting forward in the community, but I appreciate it. You know, I think a ton of people appreciate you giving access to people. And I'm
Yeah, man,
thanks so much
absolutely.
for, you know, thanks so much for coming on and talking Warrior with me, and
Yeah,
discussing
man.
the local, you know, the American scene, you know, something that we actually get to say now, the American meta. We have one. We've
Right.
got a meta. And
Yeah.
I'm psyched for that. So real quick, if you want to give if you want to plug your channel or give shout outs to anybody, I'd love to give you an opportunity to do that before we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we I put together this Tolarian Dropouts Facebook page and YouTube channel and Twitch. You know, I'll continue to keep streaming the skirmish events if you guys keep enjoying it. You know, I that's why I do it. You know, I don't do it for any other reason other than just trying to get competitive gameplay out to players, because that's what I wanted forever when I was trying to get in the game. You know, I played Magic for a really long time, you know, and there's a ton of content for that. And yeah, I mean the channel name's kind of like a pun on words to Magic. You know, I used to play Magic for a long time, and I no longer play, so you know it's kind of like Tolarian Dropouts. You know, so kind of silly, but yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, you guys keep watching, keep commenting. You know, I love it. I try to literally reply to everybody. I've just been getting like nothing but great, you know, great support and comments for you guys. You know, like reaching out and just saying that you really like the stream and the content and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just trying to add to the community and just expand the gameplay access to players out there. You know, you know that's really it with that. And shout out to Tom Penny, you know, and Davis Kingsley. I mean, those two guys right there have been my main guys for building this warrior deck. I mean, we go back and forth all the time. You know, especially Davis and I. You know, what did you think about this? What did you know? How did this work in this scenario? And oh, I'm thinking about adding this. And you know, it's been great. It's been a great community to just be able to talk to other players, you know, throughout the world, to just be able to, you know, communicate with them and talk strategy, and everything's been great so far, man. I'm gonna keep it trucking along. Plan on streaming the rest of skirmish season, and then we'll try to, you know, just get some more like TTS games, webcam games. Gonna try to do some events later on in the future. You know, put maybe like a cash tournament or something in down the line, just to kind of bring some more content, you know, to the community. So I really appreciate you and you know everything you do, man. I mean, you guys are awesome. You reached out to me, and I was kind of like shell shocked when you guys reached out to me. I'm like, whoa, are these guys really talking to me right now? Like I was watching their channel forever, you know. Um, and it's really cool, man. Everybody's been really just awesome in the community. So I thank you for what you do and all the content you know put on and everything, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're the same as you, man. Like we from the very beginning, it's been we just want to put content out for people to watch. We love this game and we really enjoy playing it, and we just want to play it for a long time. We're excited for the future of Flesh and Blood. So thank you everybody for hanging out with me and hanging out with Rob. Rob, thanks again for coming on. We will have his channel and Facebook and everything. We'll have links down in the description. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe to us. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe to him. We would both appreciate it, and we would be incredibly grateful for the likes and the subscribes, not because they mean any cash in our pocket, because it just gets more content out there. It makes us more accessible to people so we can share this game that we love and continue to grow this community. So thanks everybody so much for coming and hanging out, and we will see you next time. Peace.